Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Medieval Reader. So today I am in a new place. Actually, I'm just further back, sitting right in front of my bookshelves. So let me know if you think this is better or worse than where I was before. But today I am doing the grab 10 books and talk about them tag, which was created by Sean the Book Maniac. I will link his original video down below. For the tag, I am supposed to randomly choose 10 books off my shelves. Some read, some unread, and just talk about them. So I chose 10 that I felt really represented my reading taste. So I'm going to I have a stack right here, so I'm going to go through them one at a time. So the first book is the new collected poems of Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry is a Kentucky author. I lived in Kentucky for 6 years, and he is a poet, an essayist, a short story writer, a novelist. He is a man of letters, and I love his poetry. They're all about the environment, particularly in eastern Kentucky, where he's from. So I will read one of my favorite poems to you. The Cold. How exactly good it is to know myself in the solitude of winter, my body containing its own warmth, divided from all by the cold, and to go separate and sure among the trees cleanly divided, thinking of you perfect too in your solitude, your life withdrawn into your own keeping. To be clear, poised in perfect self-suspension toward you as though frozen, and having known fully the goodness of that, it will be good also to melt. Beautiful poet, love him. Okay, next book. Becket by Jean-Henri. I have not read this, but this is a play on the life of Thomas Becket, who was murdered in Canterbury Cathedral in 1170. He was Archbishop of Canterbury under Henry II, I believe. And the reason why I got this was written before T.S. Eliot's Murder in the Cathedral, which is one of my favorite plays. And I've heard this is not as good as Murder in the Cathedral, but this cover is hideous. Okay, but I do look forward to reading it. It's quite short. And it's in French. I'm sure there might be some translations. I don't know. Then a book that I have been putting off forever because I know that I will love every word, but I really need to get to it soon. And that's The Secret by Francesco Petrarca. So if you don't know, I have a particular interest in St. Augustine, and so did Petrarca. Petrarca wrote 3 dialogues imagining that he was in conversation with St. Augustine. And they deal with a lot of existential questions, evidently. Petrarca was a 14th century Italian humanist. And when I saw this book for, I think it was like $7 at a used book sale, I snatched it up. These things are so expensive if you were to buy them. Brand new. So I was just like, wow. It's crazy. It's published by Bedford St. Martin's. It's edited with an introduction by Carol Quillen, who I'm guessing is the translator. But anyway, there you go. The next book is a book I read earlier this year for class, and I loved it. It was so gripping. And it was surprising how gripping it was because it was written in the 17th century. Actually, no, 18th century. It's an Enlightenment text. Manon Lescaut by Abbé Prévost. Manon Lescaut should be available in English. I'm sure if I find any translations, I will link them below. This story is told from the perspective of a young man. He's an aristocratic man, and he is head over heels in love with this girl named Manon Lescaut. But he's also really jealous because he starts to realize that she's probably cheating on him. And her father does not want her being with this guy. And anyway, there's so much drama in this story. I couldn't believe what happened. I mean, this guy will go through great lengths to be with this girl. And it would probably constitute young adult today. But I thought it was phenomenal. I mean, it was unbelievable. If you want a fun French classic, Manon Lescaut is for you. It's ridiculous. Then one of my favorite spiritual works of all time, Revelation of Divine Love by Julian of Norwich. I've talked about this work before. I did a whole video on Julian of Norwich. I will link it below. This was back when my lighting well, my lighting isn't really great still, but when I was using my laptop, so excuse the quality of the video. But this was translated into English by John Skinner. And Julian of Norwich was a 14th century mystic. Like I said, I will link the video down below and you can learn more about why I think she's interesting. You should check her out. Then, some really interesting medieval text. Silence, or Silence. This is from the 13th century, and it is about a transvestite girl. She disguises herself as a boy. Actually her parents do, because she lives in a kingdom in which it is legal for women to inherit property. And then when she reaches puberty, she has an identity crisis. And this book is so interesting in the way that it deals with gender. This translation is Saram Rochmadi. It's into English. It has the original French on the left and the modern English on the right. The translation is not the best. It is unfortunately the only translation we have into English, but you should definitely read this. It's so interesting, especially today when we think about gender transgression or non-binary individuals, trans individuals. This definitely plays with gender. And it's so interesting because there is a theme in the story that actually even existed in saints' lives, in which women disguise themselves as men and pass as monks. And they're only discovered to be women after they've died and their body is being prepared for burial. So there is actually a whole tradition of transvestism in even religious writings. This is secular. This is part of, it's sort of set in the Arthurian universe, so Merlin appears in the story. Unfortunately, the ending is not the most progressive, but it is still incredibly intriguing. And every year there are more and more studies on this. So if you want something really interesting that's medieval, I highly recommend Silence. Then I got an art book. This is one of my favorite artists, Hiroshiga. Hiroshiga was a 19th century Japanese woodblock printer, and I will show you some of the art. It is incredible. So this is the small port in the inlet in Awa province. He did a number of different series. His most famous series is known as the 100 Famous Views of Edo. Edo was the old capital of Japan. I don't know if Edo was Tokyo. I don't know if it's the same city. There is one, this one. Van Gogh actually did a reprint of this. But it's really cool, isn't it? And that is from the 100 Famous Views in Edo. So I love this. This edition is Prestol is the publisher, and Matthew Forer is the one who has written the text to go along with each of the prints. He also did some geishas. I will see if I can find a geisha. Well, there's some geishas in here. Well, this is geishas. Yeah, there's some geishas in here. See? And this is Evening Cherry at Nakanocho in the Yoshiwara. It's from the series Famous Views in the Eastern Capital. So anyway, I love Hiroshiga. A lot of Japanese woodblock print isn't in museums, at least in the museums I visited, and I visited some pretty important museums in the United States. They just don't, I don't know why. Some museums do actually have Hiroshiga, but my Cleveland Art Museum does not, and it really annoys me. Because it's one of the best museums in the country. Then my favorite book of all time, Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, The Little Prince. I will at some point do a whole video on this, but this edition was actually bought from the Botanical Gardens in Cleveland. I had my own edition, but I had marked it up, highlighted, written over all the words to, you know, translate some of the words I didn't know into English. This edition I have kept clean. Now, I say clean, but I don't know if you can tell, but it's absolutely revolting. That's when I bought it. It was a used copy, and it's really gross, but I wanted a cheap edition that, that wasn't already annotated. There was actually some words that had been penciled in, but I erased it. And it's actually reading the preface that I realized that the fox's wisdom, it is only with the heart that one can see well what is essential is invisible to the eyes. It's only while reading the preface that I realized that I was influenced by Pascal. Le cœur a ses raisons que la raison ne connaît point. The heart has its reasons that reason knows nothing of. Like, it's influenced by Pascal, and I didn't even realize that. Anyway, The Little Prince. I will do a whole video on it. Maybe I'll do a read-along of it, because it is my favorite book of all time. The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. This is Todd the librarian's favorite book. So it inspired me to get it because I watched him rave about it, and I love seafaring novels. And I haven't read this one, look how short it is. I read a short story collection by Ernest Hemingway, the Nick Adams stories, I believe they're called. And I really thought it was an interesting collection. I read it when I was a bit too young, I think, but I really do want to read The Old Man and the Sea. And finally, a self-help book. This is The Professor is In, The Essential Guide to Turning Your PhD into a Job by Karen Kelsky. So Karen Kelsky came to the University of Kentucky when I was going there the last semester of my master's, and she was invited to speak. I actually purchased this book, and so this isn't, you know, a promotion or anything. And I decided to get the book because she talks about how to prepare yourself from your first year of your PhD if you want a tenure track position. Now, tenure track positions are not common. I mean, they're very rare, they're very hard to get, and it's almost like an Olympic sport. So there is a lot packed in here. I thought this is wonderful. I'm almost done with it. This is a book that I know that I will be consulting increasingly in the next few years to get everything that I need, so that at least I have a chance. But I do recommend this. She does have a service. I'm not going to recommend the service. I have nothing to do with that. I think this book, though, is really good if you are starting a PhD, particularly if you're a woman. She gives a lot of advice to women, which I really appreciate. She recognizes that it's harder for women, and she's also queer, so she also addresses that, and her partner, and how she got her job, and all of that. So this I really do recommend. So those are my 10 books. Let me know if you've read any of these. And I think this was a great tag. It was really easy to do, and it allowed me to talk about the books that I have purchased. Some I've read, some I haven't, and to kind of talk a little bit about my shelves. Thank you, everyone. Bye now.